Hello, everybody. Tommy here again. Wanted to talk today about changing out motors on a Universal Screens shade. So, what we have here, let me turn the gimbal down on my AI camera so I can show you everything. What we're going to do is we're going to go down and look, turn tracking off. We're going to, okay. So, what we have here is a tube that has a motor in it. Now, this particular one, we don't know if the motor is good or bad. Let's just say it's bad. So, what you're going to need to do is look for on the tube where the motor screws, there's a whole bunch of different screws in this because it's been used for many different videos. So, on this particular one, roughly about 26 inches from the end of the motor is going to be a screw. So what I do first off is just to make sure nothing moves whenever I take this out, I take a pencil and I draw a line on the metal tube to show how far it is sticking out. So I don't know if you can see this, but there's a pencil line to how far this tube is sticking out. So then what we're going to do is you want to measure. Measure from the edge. Keep moving this the opposite direction. From the edge here to where that screw is. Now in this particular one, because you want to make sure that it matches up. Actually, let me change that. Go to the the roller tube where the motor fits. You're going to measure from there all the way to the center of that screw right now. So at this particular point, it is 22.5 inches. So what I usually do is mark that on the tube so I do not lose it. Let me find a marker real quick. This particular one is 22.5 inches. The reason why there is a couple of different holes on this tube is because sometimes the motors change in manufacturing when we get them, and that means that you have to be very aware that when you're putting the new motor into the tube, that it lines up here so you're not either screwing into the motor or you're missing the drive that's on the end of the motor. So Universal Screens uses a drive that goes on the end of the motor. What this is designed for is this is what fits into the motor tube and turns. When the motor is physically mounted, the motor doesn't turn. It's the drive on the end that spins back and forth. So on this particular one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that screw out, and you'll notice on this particular one, and it's almost all manufacturers, that whenever when they mount this in there, you have to countersink, because if this screw sticks up, when the fabric rolls on it, it's going to stack in that location and could cause some complications. So on this particular one, what we're going to do is pull it out now. You're going to slide it all the way out. Now, this particular one has a auto stop. It is a 525 Altus with an auto stop and a drive. So with the measurement that we took earlier, which was from the end of the motor, actually, we move the gimbal around a little bit. Oops, go back, back, back. Okay. It's actually going to be from the end of the motor to where that screw is going to go into this black piece. So there's a little hole right here. So on this particular one, where it's mounted, it's hitting that hole. Now, let's say you don't have an Altus. This particular shade is real small. We put an auto stop in it so I could use it for demos. But you get a Maestria, pull the motor tube down. A Maestria motor, if you notice already, it is shorter. So if you were to put the drive from the old motor onto the new motor and go to put this in the tube, your screw for this one is in a different location than it is on this one. So you need to measure this, re-drill a hole in there so you make sure when you slide this in there that you can screw it back together. Now, also to remember is all of the Somfy motors have pins inside of there. So see, this does not come off. What you're going to do is there's two pins inside there. One on one side, you're going to push, lift it, just slightly twist it. There's one right across from it, and whenever you push that one in, this comes right off. You'll see that there is a clip right there. That clip is what holds that drive on the end of the motor. So whenever you snap it on, it just snaps in and it does not come off. And then when you put it back in the tube, you need to be very certain that there is, see this is the crown. This is what fits into the motor tube. This pin has to be fit into a slot inside of the motor tube. So that way it's not rocking and missing, which causes complications when you're setting up the programming. So on this particular one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the Altus back in, only because this is what it was originally designed for. The teeth here fit inside of the tube a very specific way. So what you will do is line them up, and then as you're putting this in, there's a little notch right there. That's what this crown is going to fit right back into. You have to wiggle it around a little bit. Once that drops down in there, but see, if it's not, then it's going to click back and forth, which is going to cause the motor not to want to work right. So all I'm doing is putting it back in there. Hold this in. You know, we made sure that the screw was back in there. Is it the correct screws, I think? There's too many holes in this one. Screw it back in. Whoops, wait a second. That's not where I wrote my measurement right next to it. This is very precise. You have to watch. Ah, it was this one. Make sure that's back in there, because that's where the pencil mark is. And all you're going to do is, and there's normally two screws. This particular shade, because it is so short, it has one solid motor tube that goes all the way through. So the idler end, which is on this end down here, and the motor fit in one solid tube. Normally, the motor tube goes just the length of the crown and drive inside of it, and then the idler is a lot smaller because you don't need that full length. But when you're doing a smaller shade, it's just easier to do one full length. So I put it back together, and as you can see now, oops, you know what? I bet you this one's not even matched up. Excuse me for that. So let me go back and measure again to make sure I have it in the right screw hole. Like we said, you want to measure from here to the end, and actually to fit that, it is 24 and 3/8. Let's see if I do that. Okay. So when it was assembled, I guess it wasn't put in the right holes to begin with either, because it should not have rocked like that whenever I took it, whenever I went to pull it out. So now what we're going to do is put it back in. We're going to slide it all the way back, make sure the drive fits in the slot, and the crown matches the slot again. Okay, and it's 24 inches from the outer tube, I'm sorry, the motor tube out. So I have 24-inch right there. As long as you're hitting the drive that's on the end of the motor, that's where it's the most crucial, because if you hit the auto stop clutch that's up farther, it's going to cause that to not work right. So we have it in there again. See if we can make this right this time. Okay. Now, whenever I grab a hold of the motor, it should not move. Should not move at all. So, with that being said, hold on, let me bring this back up. All right. So, what we just did was we changed out two different motors, showed the difference that motors could come in. It could still be a 525, but the Altus is longer than the Maestria. So, if you happen to have an extra motor in your truck and you're switching the two motors out, be very aware of your measurements, because if you take a Maestria out and you stick an Altus back in, it could be 3 inches longer, which means when you go to put that screw back in there, you're going to hit the motor and short circuit the motor out, and then you got to replace the motor anyways, and that means your customer has to wait even longer. But by all means, you need a small drill bit to drill the hole for the screw, and then you need a countersink. Now, if you do not have a countersink, or people do not understand what a countersink is, a countersink drill bit is just threads, and all it's designed to do is, I think they have them in quarter, 3/8, half inch, and 3/4 countersinks. And all you do is when you drill the hole, you just run it down in there, and it creates a chamfered slope in the drill hole bit that you drilled, so that way your screw will set down in farther and it doesn't cause complications on the tube. So always remember, Altus, Maestria, and the 500 series motors are different sizes. Now, also the 510 motor, which we do not use except on display shades, very small shades, the 510 motor is even a different size than the 525. The 550 is slightly larger than the 525 as well, but it all has to do with the torque and the gears that they have to put in there for those motors to raise up and down. That's the whole reason why the motors get longer and shorter and things like that. I hope this helps everybody today when you're changing out a motor on a universal shade. Thank you and have a great day.